basically learn the steps from there to be a quote-unquote functioning person in society. I was intelligent, but I just didn't have those cues where I could talk with people. And every time I thought someone was paying attention, I didn't have this idea of control where I didn't feel like I was in the room. I wasn't present. And this created that whole anxiety boundary, as I like to call it.
Welcome back to AST's It's All Mental podcast. I'm your host, Eduardo Sicilia, and today we have a really special guest. Now, before that, you guys know this guy over here, our founder, Jim Madrid, who is going to give us a little bit of an intro to what you guys can expect from these interviews with our head coaches. And we'll explain a little bit about the backstory and how he met today's special guest. Welcome, Jim.
Hey, thanks, Eddie. This is great. Yeah, we have been getting, you and I were talking earlier, we have been getting some good feedback about the podcast. There is so much more guests that we're going to have on from the science world and from pro athletes and college coaches, pro coaches, and some of our student athletes that have gone through the program and where they are today. So I can't wait for some of that. But anyways, we do have a great guest on today. Who's that?
So today we have Chance Sanford. So tell us a little bit about Chance.
I've known Chance, let's see, how long have I known him? Since the day he was born. I've known Chance. His family are very good friends of my wife and I and our family, just great family friends. And Chance, he's just a special human being. And watching him grow up, he's going to probably talk about his condition, which I believe we all have different conditions. You do, I do, everybody does. Mm-hmm. And, because of Chance, he's really opened up my eyes to a lot more than just about sports, but outside of sports. And the basic challenges that every one of us as human beings, we face, in our daily lives. Like I said, I've known him his entire life, and watching him grow up and deal with what the challenges that he had to deal with throughout his life. And I wouldn't say overcame it, how he deals with it, as I think is such a great lesson for all of us on how we need to deal with it. He has Asperger's. And I got to tell you, we were interviewing him on another podcast, and he told us the story that he's in college and he's in the debate class. And I said, well, how are you going to open up the debate and introduce yourself? Because, they're going to see that you have a kind of a condition, And he said, well, I'm going to tell everybody that I have Asperger's. And I go, yeah. And he goes, but I'm going to explain to him that doesn't mean I've got burgers coming out my ass. And I went, okay, Chance, that's going to work really, really well. So he's just a great kid. And I know you're going to enjoy interviewing him. And I think we have a lot to learn from Chance Sanford.
Well, with that intro right there, on that note, I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the interview. Well, just as we talked about with Jim, we are really pleased and excited to have Chance Sanford with us today. Chance, thank you for being here.
Well, I'm glad to be here, Eddie. Thank you for inviting me.
Right. So Jim gave us a little bit of an intro to the story of who you are and how you got involved with AST, but I would like to hear your version.
Well, the reason I got involved with AST was because in, I would say, 2019, I was a nervous wreck. For most people who don't know or have not heard from AST, I have something known as Asperger's syndrome, which is a neurobiological disorder which increases anxiety and allows me to think in different ways other than what normal people, in quotations, would think. In 2019, I hit a rough patch in my college year. I thought I was losing control of everything. Thankfully, Jim, being the wonderful family friend that I know, came and taught me about AST and showed me many things, such as the 10 pillars, the 7 different views, and allowed me to understand and formulate this idea, which in turn, where I wanted to help benefit people who have same anxiety issues like me, where I would outreach and teach through these program steps and share stories from my personal life and show them that through this, you can control your anxiety no matter how much fear of losing control or how many things can change here and there, and allow them to expand their goals and many of their, how do I put this, zones that they have created, and break those, allowing them to expand out there.
Right. No, that's awesome. And I wanted to ask you, so how long ago did you join the team?
I joined about 2 years ago. I would say right around April that's when I first joined and was asked to join by Jim personally, and doing all the research, getting all the paperwork, and funny enough, getting one of the books that Jim had and reading through this, it got me so invested and interested in this whole program that I'm going out of the way and helping people that also have many fears and anxiety, and helping build up that courage to do what we have to do in life and not be afraid of something such as what I have that could be hampering or be deterred by other things in life, which are like school or other things that we think we can't control. By helping them understand that we can sometimes not control things, and we just got to roll with the punches with a good attitude and just strive for something better. And that's why I wanted to be part of this and help focus primarily on the fears of people and help build up that courage that we can get through.
I totally agree, and I'm really excited to hear your perspective on a couple of subjects that I would like to discuss with you. But before we dive into the concepts, give us a little bit of a backstory to you. You know, who's Chance Sanford before these past 2 years?
Well, it's very tough. I mean, before all this, I didn't even know I had Asperger's until the age of 15. When I was 6 years old, I had to go to social therapy and basically learn the steps from there to be a quote unquote functioning person in society. I was intelligent, but I just didn't have those cues where I can talk with people. And every time I thought someone wasn't paying attention, I didn't have this idea of control where I didn't feel like I was in the room. I was present. And this created that whole anxiety boundary, as I like to call it. I think that's what fed into it. In the fourth grade, I had to go to learning therapy because the anxiety got so bad that I had to kind of find a new way to learn through it and not be afraid of time constraints for tests, which were now popping up in my life, or how I would not understand a subject and instead of raising my hand like a normal kid, would just sit in the back quietly, because I was too afraid of saying that I need help. It has gotten to that point where I didn't want help. And this followed me all the way up into high school and college. Even after I found out I had Asperger's at 15, when I went to a therapist who told me what was wrong and what my symptoms are and what I have, I was still afraid of just losing control. And I believed I can do this only by myself. I could only do that. And it wasn't until, I would say, 2019 of college where I failed my first class, which meant I had to retake it, that I understand and kind of broke down to the point that I needed help.
What college did you go to?
Fullerton College. I'm glad to inform everyone that I did finally graduate. I am now transferring over to Cal State Fullerton.
Congrats.
Go Titans.
Yes, sir.
I got through the process this summer. It was very, very tough because I tried applying last semester, but didn't get in. But hey, second time's the charm.
Yes, sir. Hey, all of that pays off.
Yep. Like one of the fundamentals says, have a good attitude. Like attitude matters because it's important. You can't just get discouraged and kind of like, well, I tried. I guess they don't accept me. I just said, well, got to do it again. Have a good attitude about it and get in. And basically, it was around 2019 after my folks found out I failed this class, and that means I would be set back by a semester or two, that I just kind of broke down. I just thought I lost all control of my life at that moment. And then thankfully Jim came in. He was like, hey, I got this opportunity for you. You can choose if you want to do it or not. And I chose to do it because I thought maybe through all these experiences I had, I can help someone with it. After reading all the paperwork and all that, I'm really excited to full on help people with this through all these messages and sharing my life story.
Right. So talking about your life story, quick question. Do you have brothers and sisters?
Yes, I do. I am the oldest out of the family. I have my sister, who's the middle child, Zoe Sanford, and my youngest brother, Bo.
Okay. So growing up, how was your interaction with them?
I would say it's not as usual as my siblings. I love them. They love me. But I noticed I was like looking back, I'm very distant. I kind of always like being a little bit alone. I'm very extroverted, but I kind of always like sometimes to be by myself from my sisters. I can like my sister and my brother because I can see back then I have different interests than them. And sometimes they don't like talking the things I like to talk about. And I respect that. And I kind of notice socially, which now I'm trying to refix. I'm trying to talk to them more often than what I used to do. Kind of just push myself out and try to meet a common interest that they do. Like my brother right now loves building computers. He has like a computer he's building himself, and I'm trying to understand the whole process so we can find a common interest there.
You use words as or phrases as back then. I assume like you're talking about that now it's maybe a different story. Were they a crucial part of you, changing and realizing like, hey, I don't have to do this alone. I can get help?
Yeah. It was major because after all of that, I started noticing that they are in my corner. No matter what happens, because you know that old saying, siblings always will fight. Yeah, we're always gonna have a little issues here and there, but they always got my back. They know I have this, and I do appreciate what they try to do. They try their best to kind of like understand what I have and listen, while I also respect when I need to kind of like stop the subject when I go 40 meters in, as I like to say, and move on to something that we can share in common instead of my common interests, because they've helped me learn that sometimes I just got to stop talking about what I like and kind of understand the broader subject.
Of course. And staying with the family topic, Jim mentioned it a little bit in the intro. Me and Jim, outside of the podcast, we've talked about it, and I know your parents were a great support system for you, and one of the main reasons why you got together with Jim and AST and all of that. So tell me a little bit about them.
Jim and Wendy, that's their names. Wonderful people. My mom and dad have always been there. They have been my number one fans ever since I started like walking. And they were the ones who encouraged me to go through therapy, do all that, like just to become a better person. My pops always put in this idea of just being a goofy, fun guy, but get serious when you need to get serious. And my mom, she was probably the biggest contributor of always pushing me out of my comfort zone. I mean, every time I was like afraid to go to the office or go somewhere interesting, like theater in high school, she would be like, don't just stand there, go. And I think with her always pushing me into the deep end, it's kind of been kind of like ingrained in my head to just go out there and do it. And by joining AST, I think that's amplified it to a point now where I used to be afraid of going to a counselor at college because I was afraid of what they're talking about. I'm writing down like full on appointments with teachers at Cal State Fullerton by myself now, not afraid of what they're going to say and being like, okay, I'll see you Friday. We'll talk about parking and all that.
Yeah, I think we mentioned this on the first episode with Jim, where we are not counseling, right? So AST is not about explain me how you feel and we can discuss a better solution or a better way. It's about understanding your brain and how to rewire it, as we like to call it, in a proper way, in a positive way. So before we get into what's your position right now, what you're doing right now for the team, tell me a little bit about your process. So you met with Jim. What did he tell you? What did you go through? How did it help you?
I think in a way it has taught me so many interesting ways and kind of like insights into how to work with it. Like for many things like vision, like from the 7 fundamentals, like vision drives performance. It's basically just what we have to focus on, what we have to achieve. Rules like that and attitude matters and setting goals and expanding comfort zones. It kind of taught me these new methods and how I could restructure things and try to approach something new in life without being afraid. And this has allowed me to not only kind of understand, control my anxiety, but better me as a person by taking these fundamentals and putting them into practice. Because I would say if I didn't know about this 2 years ago, I would still probably be afraid of reaching out to people like one on one without anyone's help. But by doing this, I'm kind of expanding my comfort zone from what I usually am, because I always have this bubble of like, this is what's fine for me. But now I'm pushing that out more and allowing myself to, with these fundamentals and these pillars, to go out, meet people, and formulate a plan to be that kind of like attention getter for most people when talking about the subject of anxiety.
I know you're mentioning the 10 pillars and the 7 fundamentals, which are two of our, if not the two main programs that we talk about. But I would like you to choose one, your favorite one, either a pillar or a fundamental. And I would like you to, like you said, go 40 feet in and explain me what is it about.
Well, I would probably have to say my top pick one is attitude matters. And this one has been the most important for me because even in 2019, I actually picked up a job before ever being part of AST. And I started noticing that keeping up this upbeat attitude is the most important, because attitude, in a word, is infectious. Because it's not just you, it's how you present yourself in public. If you're going to be very, depressed, downtrodden, someone's going to pick up that notice, and it's slowly kind of going to feed into the public. Or if you're very negative or hateful, it's also going to make that person very negative and hateful towards another person. So when I started realizing about this, I started focusing more on the positives in life instead of focusing on the negatives and the bad sides of life. I started focusing on the positives and simple things like saying hello to a random person nicely and being more understanding and listening about a person's day. And the immediate thing I saw when I started doing this is people lighting up with a smile on their face and opening up about their day and talking about if it's good or if it's bad. And every time I hear if it's good, I'm like, well, I'm like, it can always be better, but hey, at least the day's going great. You're having fun, you're out here, you're exploring the air, getting good fresh air. And if they usually say, well, my day is pretty bad, I'm like, well, hey, it can only get better from up here. Just always got to look on the bright side and keep that smile going. Because I do believe at this point that attitude really matters, even in today's society, when what's going on. Because if we try to keep that positive vibe going, or that positive attitude towards other people, it will start to spread and kind of release this anxiety, pent up like fear that people have, or this negative leech, as I like to describe it, in their body. By showing that someone else is kind of like very positive and actually caring enough to understand what's going on in their day, it kind of gives them a little bit of a positivity boost in a sense, allowing them to know, hey, someone that I don't know actually cares about me and is asking me, how is my day? Just something simple as that.
And I fully agree. I think it's so underrated. Something like that, something as simple as energy can just light up a room. I feel like any one of us, when we walk in there, like you mentioned, when you bring that positive attitude, we can definitely change everyone around us. And we don't even realize that sometimes. Your posture, how you talk, if you're listening to people, just like you said, the number one thing everyone likes to talk about, it's about themselves. It's about their day. It's about how things are going. So if you lend them an ear for a couple of minutes, that can definitely change their day. And I fully agree. I think that positive attitude, like you mentioned, can change sometimes someone's life.
Yeah, I always tell everyone that, because there's always that person who's like, what is wrong with that guy? Or what's their attitude? And I'm like, you don't know what's going on in their life. I mean, they could be having probably the best day of their life, because who knows, they probably won the lottery or something. Mm-hmm. Or they're probably having the bad day where something they couldn't control and they're kind of not processing it properly. So it's always that idea of just reaching out a hand, saying hello in a nice attitude with a wonderful smile, and just asking how their day is. And whatever the answer is, you give your best attitude towards it and be like, either, well, it can always be better, or I'm glad your day is going great. If you can somehow raise that positivity or just build up that positivity, no matter how that person's day is going, you can somewhat, in a way, bring that person up from whatever they're feeling from.
Right. And I think I will be jumping a little bit over the line to another fundamental. But something that's really crucial, I think, is we have to understand that people might be projecting themselves. Just like you said, if they're having a really tough day, you might not know why they are doing what they do, right?
Right.
Sometimes we gotta understand that people might be coming from different perspectives, might be coming from a different background, might not understand exactly everything the same way that you do. But I don't know if you've heard this phrase, that person got me stressed, or that person got me mad. And I believe after reading our material that that's incorrect. Using those phrases is totally incorrect, because no one can make you feel anger. No one can make you feel stress. You yourself control that. Whatever that other person might be projecting towards you, it's up to you to control how you react to that information and how you feel about it.
Exactly. It's like that old saying goes, our biggest critic is ourselves. We don't want to admit to ourselves that, I'm beating myself up or I am scared. Sometimes we want to put the blame on someone else for what's going on, where it's like, oh, that person's stressing me out. When in reality, you're stressing yourself out because that person probably just has, just a different look to them, or just has something going on with their speech or something that we ourselves are uncomfortable with. And we won't admit that we are uncomfortable. I mean, I'm guilty of this as well. I mean, there are people
Everyone
that,
is.
yeah, exactly. Everyone is. There, that little self thing right there. But everyone is guilty of this because sometimes we evaluate people before we actually get to know who they are, which jumpstarts all these emotions, this anxiety, this fear. And sometimes we'll probably never get that positivity out or even that crucial understanding of that person because we are holding ourselves back from doing that.
Yeah, no, totally. You're right. And jumping off of that topic a little bit, and after 2 years of you working with AST or through the process of understanding AST's concepts and lessons, right now you're part of the team. And right now you have a function on AST. And I think it's pretty funny, or at least clever, the way we word our coaches. So it's a head coach, but emphasis on the head instead of like a football head coach is a head coach because, we talk about brain stuff and psychology and stuff like that. So
Exactly.
explain us a little bit about your function in the team. What do you do normally? How you share your story?
Well, for what I've been doing for this team, I have been constantly writing and rewriting for seminars that I'll be going to for high schools when we are allowed back in after certain legislations go down. And my idea is to take these principles and pillars and attach these as lessons from my personal experiences. How basically make it more accompanying to these high school students that I'll be visiting. Basically, teaching them how to control this anxiety from an early age where we would most commonly start to experience it. Because once we leave middle school, that's where all the kid stuff ends and we start learning to become an adult. And it's very stressful. Even for me in high school, it was very stressful to grasp this new stage in life. And I would probably say this is where I felt most of my anxiety. And I think it's a good way to start here and basically take what I have learned from AST, mix it together from my personal experiences, and share this with the students and allow them to take these concepts and ideas and use these to help with their life. Basically, learn something from it in turn.
You know what's something that I love? I think this generation, it's way more interested on being self-aware and understanding what's going on their environment and inside of themselves. I believe that, some people might make fun of it, oh, mental health, or now everyone needs to go to the psychologist or whatever. At the end of the day, it's good to go to the psychologist for everyone. We should all go.
Yeah.
But right
Exactly.
now, I think people our age, not even our age, younger people, people who are in middle school right now, you compare them with the generation of 30 years ago, they care about what they eat. They are interested in understanding their brains, why they are feeling certain emotions. And I feel like we're making a really good job of getting our kids ready for the future through that. Now, obviously, we have to be conscious and we have to be successful at expressing ourselves. And like you said, pretty much chew and digest that information for us to be able to provide that in the more concise and proper way.
Exactly. In my opinion, if you just spew the information out, like, oh, blah, 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 shoot right there, they're not going to pick it up. You have to somehow kind of like relate to them, kind of show to them that this is how this contributed and helped me improve my life. Even before I know what this is, there's a couple of these where I'm like, I think I've used this before. And I wrap that in with a previous story and kind of relate it to them in a way they can understand without me just giving the topic definition. Giving them more of my personal experience shows that I've been in their shoes. And even with all this stuff that we are now being attentive of, they can learn from my experience and kind of be attentive of what's going to be happening soon, or if there's something relative in their life that's going on that's close to my story, that they can probably use one of these to help bridge that gap of challenge that they have to go through. Some kids have tough mental health spaces right now, and it can be challenging to gap that. But hopefully, through some of these experiences that I've had and the ideas that we have learned, that we can help them kind of formulate a concept for themselves or learn from this concept to bridge that gap.
Right there. Formulate a concept for themselves. I think that's it. That's the key to everything, right? One thing is learning or understanding a concept or a subject, but when you bring it to your own life and start applying it under your perspective, under your experiences, that's when everything starts to click. Now, I know you've been answering this throughout the program, but I want you to state it as direct of an answer as possible. So, why are you doing this?
I want to make this more apparent to people. Anxiety is not a topic that's brought up a lot because, sometimes we're like brushing it under when a kid brings up that they have too much anxiety. And I want to bring this up and actually help those that have anxiety issues, because sometimes people really can't beat the clock. Sometimes people have so much of this that they can't even function as people. And just by sharing my story and these concepts and allowing them to formulate something from this, I want them to overcome their anxiety, knowing that they are not alone and knowing that they can do this. They don't have to live in fear of what they can't control and of not being afraid of their own anxiety or their own holdbacks.
Before I go into my good old spiel about control what you can control and let everything else settle down for itself, I want you to explain to the audience, what exactly is anxiety?
Anxiety, like from my personal definition and my personal battles with it, I would say is this feeling of just being small. Like you can't do anything. You're just afraid to bridge that gap. And that feeling that you get when you have anxiety. I mean, for me, it starts out simple. It's just like this, tight chest feeling. Like I feel like everything's just tightening. You start stuttering, and all. Of course, for me, there's always like a personal tick that you kind of notice because you try to de-stress yourself. For me, it's just like graining, like my fingernail against my finger, and sometimes it's just not enough. You start kind of getting that tight feeling. It gets tighter and tighter. If you feel more compressed, it gets harder to breathe. And it's all caused because of change. And change is always going to happen. It always happens to everybody. And it's the most nerve-wracking experience some people can have. But that idea of anxiety kind of like building up because of this change that we never expect, because for almost everyone, we believe we have control over our life. But that's the funny thing about life. In an instant, something changes, and we have no control over it. And so that's where our fun little friend anxiety comes in. And that's where the fear, that doubt, and just that tight feeling that's so uncomfortable comes in. And it just creeps in and attaches itself.
Change is definitely a constant in life. It's an everyday little thing. Like you said, you may have a schedule, but something unexpected could come into play and just change everything, right? And going off of my experience now, I go back in time, and that was one of the hardest things for me. I've always been a control freak when it comes to my schedule and being ready for everything and executing at a certain time, blah, 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 blah. So I never liked change. Obviously, you have to adapt, but you never like change. Now, the problem was you get all these cultural references of happily ever after or forever, words that we use in movies, in books, in whatever you like to call them, social media, where you're looking for something to last exactly the same way for a long period of time. And obviously, as a kid, you get that idea. It's like, yeah, let me just find friends that will last forever, or a couple that will last forever. my family will last like this forever. But when you start realizing like, oh, wait a minute, their personality changed, mine is gonna change too, relationships change, work environments change, success change, everything's changing. Now, how you adapt to it and how you react to it, that's up to you. So I know there will be a lot of people in this audience that have experienced that tightness feeling, that I want control, but I can't have it right now. What's one of your tips for people to get out of that zone and stop feeling that anxiety?
Well, for those who are listening to this podcast, if you are facing this anxiety, and just for anyone in general, the top thing I would recommend sometimes is just breathing techniques and that constant mantra. For me personally, you have to find like a mantra that kind of brings you back down to earth, because anxiety makes you think at 1,000 miles per hour. You're like, what am I going to do? What am I going to write? What am I going to say? What am I going to do? And then for me personally, I do this thing where I'm like, count to four, inhale, count to four, exhale, and just breathe slowly, because it'll start kind of like decompressing. And the mantra I tell myself while I'm doing this is, you can't control everything, but you can try to make it better. No matter what's going on today, you can improve something, you can do something, but you cannot be afraid of it. Something's going to change, and you got to go with it. But those are the major part at the end. Something changes, go with it. Don't be afraid of it.
Right
Just
there,
slowly.
when you said don't be afraid of it, some people might see that as don't feel that afraid emotion. And I think that's not the right phrase, or that's not the right concept. Being brave
Exactly.
is not necessarily about not feeling it, but being brave is, even though you're feeling it, I'm going to go out there, I'm going to execute. Whatever it is that I have to do, I'm just going to go out there, I'm going to execute.
Exactly. Because for me, I know it's afraid, but it could be something completely different for people. And that's where it's all about whatever it is, afraid or not, go out. If things are going to change, just go out there and do it, no matter what the outcome is. It could be good, it could be bad. But the most important part about it is it's a learning experience. You become a better person out of it.
Right there, learning experience. So in my book, obviously I come from a football background and I'm a coach and all of that. I'm always putting an emphasis to my players about, you never lose. Either you win or you learn, right? How do you go about that? How do you learn from the losses, or how do you learn from a bad scenario? What's that one technique that you use to learn from those situations?
Well, for me, my technique when I have a bad situation is to kind of analyze what happened. Like, where did I go wrong, or what went wrong during the scenario? And then I analyze it. For example, I would say a year ago, I was in the middle of a busy rush, like working with the staff I have at my restaurant, and I get yelled at by a customer because we lost this ticket during a rush, probably slipped under the table somewhere, and I couldn't control the guy getting angry. I'm like, sir, we are just trying to find your stuff. We'll get to you in a minute. And looking back at it through the night, I try to realize, what did I do to kind of set this guy off a little bit. And what I realized was I was more focused on finding his ticket and being more on schedule with what's on the board for on the counter than talking to him and being more on his side and feeling what his frustration is. Kind of not like relating with him. True, it is kind of annoying to get yelled at a job that you're trying to do, but you have to kind of understand the frustration he must be feeling. He could be having a family or a son who's like really small, probably really hungry, and they've been probably waiting for like 20, 30 minutes for their food, and the kid's probably crying or something, and you're the guy holding it up. And I got to be like, okay, I got to be on the ball next time, and probably be a little more open and kind of more idealistic to the person, kind of appeal to what their frustration is, and kind of be like, I know that it's been a long wait. I'm sorry. And I'm just going to be trying to make sure that I can accommodate to you no matter what, and help you renegotiate the problem. And by doing this, I can probably, in my idea, relate to the person more next time it happens, instead of kind of focusing on the work side of it, being more with the people than more focused on my job.
I love the fact that you mentioned analyzing the problem. I'm going to go back to some of the things that society has put in the upfront for everyone to see constantly. Every time life hits you and knocks you down, stand up and go and do it again. No. If I get knocked down and I stand up and I go exactly, and I move exactly the same way I was before getting knocked down, I'm going to get knocked down again. Right. I think the better approach, and I think a lot of people are understanding this now, and this content is being put out there, is if you get knocked down, realize why you got knocked down. Like you said, analyze the situation and stand up and be better. Adjust. That's, like you mentioned, it's all about change. We have to change ourselves to better face situations.
Exactly. That is exactly what I'm trying to hit on the nail right there, because that's the most important factor of overcoming these challenges of anxiety. We have to analyze what's going on in the world and analyze our problems and what we can't breach, because if we just go on head in repeatedly doing the same thing, we're hitting a wall. You're hitting this mental wall, and it's a complete no-go. I mean, the wall is not made of like wood, which you can keep bashing through until you go through. This is a titanium wall. But if we analyze it, you can find a new way to go around it instead of going through it. Thinking of a way to go around is a lot easier than just repeatedly bashing your way through it.
Right. Which some might say, well, if you keep hitting at the wall constantly, you'll find a way to break through it. Sure, but it'll take you way more time than if you go around it or over it or whatever. Yeah. Throughout the episode, you've given us a lot of, nice golden nuggets, nice information. Love your story, by the way. Before we leave, what's that one thing that you would like to share with the audience, or that one little message that you would like them to keep with them by the end of this episode?
What I want to leave for the audience? That's a good question.
Thank you.
Here's what I want to leave. For people who are facing many things in life, anxiety or different disorders like mine, Asperger's syndrome, don't think you are effective. Do not think that you are different. You have a different way of thinking and coping. You just have to learn, like I did, to basically analyze the world you're in and kind of maneuver around the problems instead of just repeatedly doing the same thing. The minute you start analyzing the problem and trying to find a way to benefit with other people and learn from different experiences, the easier life is going to get, the more that anxiety is going to dissolve, and the more you will understand how to enjoy life as it is and keep the utmost upbeat attitude you can. And hey, that tight feeling in that chest you'll get that feels like a crunched up fist, you start feeling like it's fresh air through those rib cages. And you can probably keep going through those challenges with a chipper smile on your face and no more anxiety to go through.
Man, that's a way to sum up an episode. If you guys watched or listened to that answer right there, you saw the entire episode. That's it. Love it. Well, for you guys, once again, Eduardo Sicilia, your host. Our guest today, Chance Sanford. And this was the It's All Mental podcast.